sees us fighting alongside the Flood with awesome, completely unscripted moments that pit the game's AI against each other, Cortana is
slightly better than the library? Well, I've got some explaining to do, haven't I? Hello there guys, girls, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Larden, and in today's video, I thought I'd dip my toes, I thought some of you degenerates would like that reference, into a mission analysis. Now, Halo 3 has probably the best campaign in the series, and you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who thinks it's bad. But there's one mission that has the general consensus as being, well, not so great. Before the shutdown of the Xbox 360 Halo servers, rest in peace, we will never forget, I went back to Halo 3's campaign to do a Legendary run, as I had never actually completed Legendary on my current account. I was having a pretty fun time overall, like I usually do with Halo 3's campaign, sniping some idiot monkeys on the Ark, blasting away everyone's favorite 2 scarabs on the Covenant, and then I got to Cortana. What started off as wanting to grab every active camo power-up I could find to just speedrun through the mission eventually turned into a rather harrowing experience that led me to thinking if I was wrong about this mission the entire time. Like, I still got pissed off playing it, don't get me wrong, but it was ironically that frustration that led me to this realization. Cortana is secretly kinda great, and everything it does, good and bad, adds to the feeling of immersion. It arguably has one of the best moments in the entire Halo series, but is also sandwiched between 2 fan-favorite missions. So, is Cortana really all that bad? The whole mission has this foreboding sense of dread as you move deeper and deeper into the bowels of what was High Charity. I could make a comparison to old literature like Dante's Inferno, going deeper and deeper into the circles of hell and the challenges becoming more and more difficult, but I think that'd be better kept for Halo 3 ODST. You start dealing with a few infection forms and the far-out reaches of High Charity with bodies that the Flood haven't even infected yet, but the further in you go, the more challenging it becomes as the Gravemind throws everything it has at you, trying to stop your advance. It's strange to think this massive bustling city that held a population of tens of millions is now just gone.
23 million people used to live here, and now it's a ghost town.
Imagine being someone who lived in High Charity during the events of Halo 2. The prophets make an announcement that the Great Journey is nigh, and finally, countless years of searching and belief has paid off. Though all of this is of course a ruse trying to distract from the greater issue at hand. The Great Schism has commenced, and the elites are now at war with the rest of the Covenant. All the while this is happening, a human ship in amber clad appears through slipspace and crashes into the Holy City, heralding the arrival of something much worse than just more humans. The Prophet of Truth then hastily leaves High Charity, abandoning the rest of the Covenant, taking the Forerunner Dreadnought. The bottom of High Charity, all those structures and tree-like roots, aren't just docking bays for ships and living quarters, but part of that is the massive infrastructure built by the Forerunners that was attached to the Dreadnought that the Covenant essentially ripped out of the ground like an uprooted tree so it could stay connected to the Dreadnought. And all of High Charity was built around that, including its power. And once it left, High Charity was plunged into darkness. From there, it didn't take long for the Flood to consume everything and everyone that was left. Millions of beings left to stumble in the blackness, eventually all succumbing to the Flood and joining the Timeless Chorus. There's even a cutscene from Halo 2 which was storyboarded that shows the Flood piling up bodies from various races within the Covenant, presumably with the intention being for them to be broken down into biomass to help grow the Gravemind. There was something about playing Cortana on Legendary, walking through those corridors and parts of High Charity that were now completely unrecognizable, that felt really unnerving and uncanny, especially after just playing Halo 2 not long beforehand. It felt like walking through an abandoned shopping mall or a school during the holidays with no one around. I think I'd also be amiss to not mention the music in this mission. One of the first pieces you hear after dropping into High Charity is a reprise of the track Prologue from Halo 2, the song that plays when we first see High Charity and what a lot of people associate as the musical theme for the Covenant. It sounds almost completely different in Cortana. In fact, it's barely recognizable as the same track from Halo 2, kind of similar to High Charity in its current state. There's echoes of what once was, of a glorious empire that lasted for thousands of years. But that's all there is. Echoes. The use of brass instruments, which are typically used in compositions to symbolize something grand or epic, like the Covenant once were, and like we heard in the Halo 2 version of this track, aren't heard in this rendition. Instead, we get faint strings and a low, solemn synth pad. Whatever is left of the Covenant and High Charity is not what it once was. The level is extremely claustrophobic and really didn't give me much room to breathe. It's made even worse with Halo 3's default narrow field of view and barely being able to see what was happening around me, getting swiped from behind or down low by those annoying stalker forms while I'm trying to deal with a whole ass flood army running my way. It's a complaint I see leveled a lot at, well, the level. It's a sensory overload, there's too many enemies, yada yada yada, but if you were in the shoes of Master Chief, venturing into the closest thing the Halo universe has to HE double hockey sticks, this would probably be the type of struggle you'd be dealing with. We're in the belly of the beast here, the very heart of the flood infestation. Of course it's going to be overwhelming at times, and I feel as though Halo 3's default field of view of 78, despite being quite limiting, really helps aid in that experience, and, well, severe motion sickness. The layout of the mission is also completely bonkers, and I love it. The last time I found myself getting lost this often was probably during the first time I played 343 Guilty Spark. Instead of all the Forerunner corridors and endless repeating rooms that are all interconnected and kind of logically laid out, the transitioning from different rooms in Cortana and the environments that you fight in are, like the aesthetic of the mission, overwhelming and confusing. The Flood have no need for simple floor plans or architectural design. Everything they do serves a singular purpose, to grow and consume in the most efficient way possible. They ain't about looking nice or laying down some good foundations. They just want everything to be convenient for them. So doing loops, occasionally getting lost, and generally feeling confused about the layout and design makes it all the better. There are areas where it's almost like, I can't describe it any better than massive pieces of gum that have been stretched across a room acting as support pillars for the empty, rotting corpse of High Charity that's barely holding together. What's even more horrific, however, is stopping to consider where all this came from. The Flood typically break down the biomass of other beings to create structures like these, especially if they can't be used for combat forms if they're not strong enough. Meaning that the very corridors you're walking through are the remnants of the many alien races within the Covenant, having their core bodily components broken down into their most rudimentary form to serve as nothing but fleshy puddles of goo. You're walking through the corpses of thousands. You just can't see them. Again, that's something else I see brought up a lot in discussion about Cortana, that the art design and aesthetic of the level don't contrast well to the Flood enemies, making them hard to pick out. Lots of orange and brown blobs with guns against lots of orange and brown blobby backgrounds. When that's kind of the point. The environment is overwhelming, I'm using that word again, and it's all engulfing. It's like something from a HR Giga painting, or one of those AI-generated photos where everything is all jumbled together. You can make out faces and body parts and rough silhouettes, but it's all contorted and mangled. You're not sure sometimes when the Flood combat forms or pure forms end, and where the rest of the mission's architecture starts. It kind of adds to the body horror element. It's all one universal creature that's out to get you in different ways. Some parts of it are trying to rush you and attack you head on, whereas others are inanimate but leave you mentally drained as they funnel you into tight combat spaces or contorted, seemingly never-ending, winding pathways. If the endless amount of combat forms, those annoying fucking range forms, and the confusing layout weren't enough to get you though, I'm sure the Gravemind will. Not only does it have a psychic connection to Master Chief and the Arbiter, seemingly being able to reach out and talk to them through their minds, which is scarily never explained in the game, but it also speaks through the many types of Flood forms in the level. This is probably my favorite thing about the Flood in Halo 3. Unlike Combat Evolved in Halo 2, where the Flood are just voiceless, gurgling zombies with guns, in Halo 3 they cross the line from being space zombies to borderline demonic at times. The Gravemind will frequently talk through various Flood forms in the game, and it says some pretty messed up stuff. Not only does the AI react to what you're doing in the game, if you hide, for example, and break line of sight with the Flood, you'll occasionally hear lines like this. And when you're done hiding in the corner like the scared little bitch you are, all the Flood units in the area will say the same line. The hive mind mentality of the Flood and the fact they're all sharing the same voice, it's terrifying. Reminds me of the Borg from Star Trek or something. Just like the rest of the Gravemind's cryptic lines of dialogue, it also has some pretty messed up names for both the Master Chief and the Arbiter that I didn't really notice till recently.
The armored casket
is what Master Chief is frequently referred to by the Gravemind, and the Arbiter,
the pallbearer.
For those of you who don't know, a pallbearer is someone at a funeral who helps to carry, you guessed it, a coffin. The cryptic implication being that the Gravemind sees the Arbiter as the one who is not only aiding Chief, but in the hyperbolic and kind of morbid sense, is carrying his coffin. It just shows that the Gravemind is, well, it's a mind of graves when he sees a character like Chief as just another corpse waiting to happen. It's not an if, but a when. When playing the mission in co-op, the Gravemind will frequently say things like,
"Drop the casket, pallbearer."
This shows the cunning and the intelligence of the Gravemind, not just wearing Chief and Arbiter down physically with the onslaught of Flood forms, but also psychologically as well, trying to convince the Arbiter to give up on Chief, hence letting the coffin fall. It's not thrown in your face, it's a subtle little bit of messaging that you'd never pick up on a first or even second playthrough, but does wonders for helping to flesh out the Arbiter's character. Even amidst all of this, he sticks by Chief on his wild crusade to venture into the heart of enemy territory to get Cortana back. Arbiter sure as hell didn't have to come, but he's there, sticking by Chief right till the very end. In co-op at least. In solo he just kind of rocks up at the last minute, but still, it shows how much respect Arbiter has for Chief and how willing he is to follow him, potentially even to the death. I'm sure I'm probably looking way too much into this, but honestly, I really like Cortana now. For everything it might conventionally do wrong from a game design perspective, it makes up for from a storytelling perspective. For those who know about Halo 3's development, you'd also know that Bungie's environment artists had to sit through and watch some pretty grim stuff to get inspiration for this mission that I could not repeat without fear of being demonetized. So for the sake of their mental states and what they had to endure in order to bring us this nightmarish Halo-themed version of a haunted house ride, I think it's worth giving Cortana another visit and taking your time with it. It's still probably Halo 3's weakest mission, but that's not really saying much. Halo 3's weakest is still better than many other FPS games' best, so take from that what you will. What are some of your favorite Halo missions? Do you have a guilty pleasure or a mission that you think is underrated? Do you think this whole video was me losing my mind and having Stockholm Syndrome for a mission I don't even like? Potentially. If you haven't checked out the rest of my channel and you're a Halo nerd like I am, why not chuck a like to help bump this video up in the everlasting machine that is the YouTube algorithm? And chuck a subscription as well. You wouldn't. You're way scared.